I want to distinguish between discomfort and pain.
Mm-hmm.
Discomfort is a necessary element of growth.
Mm-hmm.
Pain is not. Pain is what happens when you're being prodded into that expansion, prodded into that growth, and you don't go with it. And what's interesting is that by doing so, right,
Mm-hmm.
by pulling the parts of you that you detest closer and including them as part of you so that you fully understand them,
Mm-hmm.
they now perceive a connection with you. And so those parts of you can't hurt you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then that means the expression out into the world is one that's going to be beneficial to you instead of detrimental to you.
Hello, dear friends. This is Kristina Mand-Lakhiani, co-founder of Mind Valley, and welcome to my Honest Conversations. And I have a very interesting guest today. And I have to tell you honestly, this is the first time I'm meeting and talking to someone who is very interesting as a human being, as a teacher, as an author, but I do not know that person personally yet. So I'll get a chance to get acquainted. So my guest today is Teal Swan. She's an international speaker and author. Hello, Teal.
Hello.
Thanks for joining me. And normally I ask from a few steps behind. I would normally ask, how did you end up talking about what you're talking about? But I guess today I want to ask, why pain? Because I've been in personal growth transformation for 17 years now, and mostly when people think about personal growth, about transformation, the first thing that they think about is, rose-tinted glasses, look at the bright side, make it happen, do it, I could do it, you could do it. It's a little unusual to talk about, the backside of it, the dark side of it. How did you come up with this topic? What compelled you to start researching this topic in particular?
There's no reason to focus on self-improvement unless you're in some sort of unwanted state, which means pain. Nobody goes towards, I want something to change if they feel good where they are. So pain is what compels people into spiritual practice and self-help, regardless of whether they admit to it or not. And I would rather go to the root of anything. That's my personality in general. People who know me already know exactly what I mean by that. Yeah, I like to drive to the root, and the root is suffering. The root is, I don't like this about my life. I want a better relationship, which means they're in pain in a relationship. And I have a very different way of looking at pain. And it's definitely not to suppress, deny, and disown it. I can tell you that.
Mm-hmm. I guess my question is, do we have to wait for the suffering to actually want to change something? Is it a necessary prerequisite? Does it mean that people who have it comfortable don't evolve through their life?
I want to distinguish between discomfort and pain.
Mm-hmm.
Discomfort is a necessary element of growth.
Mm-hmm.
Pain is not. Pain is what happens when you're being prodded into that expansion, prodded into that growth, and you don't go with it. So it means that you're in resistance somehow to that expansion for you personally. And that is preventable.
So the people who come to learn with you, learn to work with pain. What's the end point? Is it, is it getting rid of it? Is it being comfortable with that?
I don't think of having an end point. What it is that I want to give people, let's call it the personal empowerment to be able to work with their own discomfort and work with the parts of themselves that may be in resistance, so that no matter what phase they're in life, they can keep in alignment with that expanded place. So it's more that when people come to me, they're making peace with this process of pain leading to desire, and knowing that that's never a cycle that is going to end. And if they make peace with that, then it's the better it gets, the better it gets. It's basically the opposite of the way that most Buddhists approach spiritual practice, this particular element of it, because most spiritual practitioners are interested in getting out of the cycle of desire. So they have pinned desire as the thing that causes suffering, but it really is not. And you can't actually get rid of desire if you're physically incarnated. It's impossible. Even the desire to get rid of desire is a desire. So what's causing people pain is their belief that they can't get what they want. It's whatever resistance exists to the wanting. And if they learn how to work with their own resistance and dissolve it, then it's I feel a little discomfort, which means I want this thing, which means I'm taking care of any resistance in the way of getting this thing. And then I line up with it, which causes me to want more, which causes me to notice that there may be elements that are resisting that. Otherwise I would have it. So I release the resistance and now I have it. So you're constantly treating life like this expansion that you're on board with, not that you're trying to get out of life somehow.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yes, so desire is a natural part of physical existence, and you can't get rid of that. And that's the main premise of working with pain.
Yes.
So do you have to make friends with pain, or what's the deal then? Because if we can't get rid of desires, and desire is the root cause of pain, so what happens?
I don't believe desire is the root cause of pain. The root cause of pain is
Ah,
you can't have what you're wanting.
uh-huh.
If whatever resistance exists that prevents you from getting to what you are wanting.
So do you have to learn to get what you want, or?
Yeah, you have to learn to get what you want, but also, yes, part of that is having a totally different approach to pain. Pain is no longer the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Pain becomes your body's natural indication that there's a very powerful personal truth that you have been ignoring.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a personal truth that indicates there's some form of personal truth that you have not aligned with yet.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like pain is your ultimate personal indicator of your personal truth. So I have people often create this acronym, right, where you just write pain, you know, up and
Mm-hmm.
down, and it's pay attention, integrate now.
Mm-hmm.
It implies there is some form of separation.
Mm-hmm.
Separation from what I'm wanting, separation from self, separation from a state of health, separation from another person. All forms of pain actually boil down to separation.
Mm-hmm. So do you have some kind of your own system or method or technique to deal, like something causes you pain, what do you do next?
Actually, no. I've got
No?
several techniques,
Yeah.
but it doesn't work for me to just have one process that I put all people through,
Mm-hmm.
because I'd rather meet people where they are and help them close that, let's call it a gap between where they are and what they're wanting.
Mm-hmm.
Close the gap between what's causing them pain and what that pain is indicating that they're powerfully desiring.
Mm-hmm.
So I think of my job as helping the unique individual with that. And the video series that I'm doing, you know, I can't work with people one-on-one, which makes this much easier for me because one person would need something totally different than another person. I'm sort of dropping all of these tools out there so that somebody who may be suffering with some certain issue goes, aha, that's the thing for me. You know, let's say you've got somebody who's got bulimia.
Mm-hmm.
I do a video on bulimia, and I'm saying this is, you know, this is a coping mechanism. This is what you're trying to do with this coping mechanism. This is what you got to do if you want to, you know, let go of this coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
And they can do, you know, do that. But that wouldn't work for anybody who doesn't have bulimia. So that's why it's hard to narrow down like one process that I use, because
Mm-hmm.
it's so
So,
different. Also, like, I'll give you another example, which is
yeah.
good. In the self-help field, a lot of people get into this
Mm-hmm.
because they've been told their whole life that something's wrong with them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like I got to fix myself so I can get what I want. I have to fix myself so I can have a relationship and feel good. But
Mm-hmm.
deep down, there's this incredible pain that they can't just be okay for who they are and how they are. And so self-help becomes something that actually feeds the cycle of self-rejection.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody like that sits in front of me, I may be the first person to look at them and be like, stop practicing spiritual stuff, stop doing self-help, go sit on a beach somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas that's the totally opposite thing I would tell somebody who, you know, is in pain. That's not a dynamic that they have going. They really need to figure out why they keep having failed relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. So no one size fits all, obviously, with pain. Every pain is unique.
Yes.
Can I ask a little unfair question? How would you rate yourself on the, don't rate on a scale, but generally, do you find yourself a happy person?
No, I'm too smart.
That's interesting. Can you explain?
I could control the way I felt based off of what I was paying attention to. And
Mm-hmm.
I still have resistance within me. I know how to work with that resistance. So I would be somebody who's considered to be on the happier end of the scale. However,
Mm-hmm.
once you awaken to the degree that you actually recognize all things in existence as a part of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
that means everyone is a part of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So an individual awakening vanishes that quickly, because if everything is you and there's somebody who's on the street corner who is digging in a trash can, you're not awake, are you? So it's almost like the accumulative pain becomes a part of your pain. And I'll be honest with you, when it comes to the human race, it is very hard to focus on the human race and remain happy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very unhappy species.
So what do you do? Do you just stay conscious of that and are comfortable with that pain of the human beings, or do you, draw a line somewhere and say, okay, this is too far from me. I don't want to think about that.
There's no such thing as too far from me.
Mm-hmm.
What I do, having the human race as a part of me, or the people as a part of me, is what I do for a living. I feel better when I'm helping people align with better feeling. So like nothing makes me happier. You'll never see me in a better mood than when I'm doing a workshop, when I can have 20 people up on stage in a row and each one exits the stage closer to what they're wanting, closer to a state of, oh, I feel liberated from this tension, or I'm no longer in this internal war with myself, or now I know how to speak to my wife, or something like that.
Mm-hmm. But the problems which, at least in the West, seem, for example, far away. I just moved from Asia, and they were a little bit more in my face than here in Europe. How much do you, as a conscious, awake human being, have to bother about that? Not within the framework of, it's a lot of people like to help people who are close to us, like our family members, our friends, or our clients. But do we have to bother about, let's say, the things that happen thousands of kilometers away from us?
I don't think it's a have to. You see, I don't want to force people into this space. It's not even the right way to go about it. Like, I'm not here to say it's your job to alleviate suffering from the world. That's my personal goal. If I can get people to a space where they experience oneness, it's a natural inclination to not be okay with the fact that somebody's starving to death, even if they're on the opposite side of the globe and technically we're not stepping over them on the sidewalk every day. Mm-hmm. It bothers me immensely, but so many of the societal issues that are creating this level of suffering we're seeing even in third world countries is systemic. Mm-hmm. Which is why, I've chosen to go the route that I've chosen to go. Like, there's a place for people who do changes within society, right? A place for people who do systems changes or programs for homeless, or who put in water in a third world country. And that's very powerful work. However, the only reason that there are people starving on another side of the planet, when we have more than enough resources to have that not be the case for the human race, is because we experience separation. It's because the human experiences the world through a narcissistic viewpoint. It's me versus you. It's us and them. Mm-hmm. So I would rather focus on this viewpoint. And by the way, the place that viewpoint is perpetuated is in the more industrialized countries. Mm-hmm. So if I'm focusing on the tendency for narcissistic thinking in an industrialized country, I'm actually addressing the root of the problem more directly than installing a water pipe. It's not as visible, you see. Mm-hmm.
So where does the separation come from? You say it's more common in industrialized countries. Where we learn it, or how does it happen?
Yeah, we learn it. Human beings have success and narcissism linked. It's all about me, mine.
So does that mean that we shouldn't strive for success?
Oh, hell no.
Uh-huh.
No. We just have to see that an integral part of success involves others.
Uh-huh.
We got to end the zero-sum game. That's what human beings are doing right now. This is what I'm actually here to end, is the zero-sum game, which is I win and you lose. And this is the basic strategy which unevolved organisms go through in order to achieve excellence, but it's ultimately damning, especially when you depend upon the very people you're screwing.
How do you imagine the perfect world then?
I've never thought about the perfect world.
Okay, a perfectly content human being.
A perfectly content human being is somebody who has all of their needs met. For all of their needs to be met, they have to recognize the singular needs for the species that they're a part of. For example, a human being does not see itself as a herd species, as a social species. We see a deer that way, we see a dog that way. We don't see ourselves that way. So we don't understand how dysfunctional our attachment to independence is, for example.
Attachment to independence.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's profoundly unhealthy and is very different than autonomy, which all physically manifested beings desire, right? But back to this whole thing, you would not walk over to a dog
Mm-hmm.
or to a deer and have a conversation about how dysfunctional that deer or dog is based on the fact that it's so dependent on its group. We're more likely to advocate for the fact that, you know, this is not healthy. To have a deer locked up by itself in a pen is not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it's a species, it's a herd species. And human beings are that way. It is not possible for a human to be happy in a state of isolation.
Mm-hmm.
So in this world that would be more healthy for humans, it would be more tribal, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But absent of shadow tribe. And what I mean by shadow tribe is that human beings make being a member of the tribe dependent upon shadowy things. Mm-hmm. Like what happens if you're a part of a group and you don't agree that women are subordinate, but that group believes women are subordinate, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to cause pain. So what do you do when your belonging is dependent upon having to adopt a belief that's going to hurt people? That's mm-hmm. an example of shadow belonging or shadow tribe. If we end the zero-sum game, right, so that mm-hmm. everybody we have to consider everybody's best interests and find that third option or that third element where your needs are met and my needs are met, mm-hmm. then we start to evolve into tribes based off of compatibility. Mm-hmm. We start to evolve into tribes where we have to constantly question the reasons that we're doing things. So you've got an in alignment community type of a dynamic going with a human, but absent of those elements that cause pain within the social group.
Mm-hmm. So I can. Sorry?
I was just saying that's one of the primary elements to human happiness. If you're wanting a picture of this world, I should write a book on this one. Oh.
So what do you do? Because I know I have quite a lot of followers in, let's say in India and in Russia. I do not know if they can follow me in English. I do have them in Russian. And these are the societies where a lot of our ideas, maybe our Western ideas of justice, of what is right, are a little different. Even the place of a woman. I have perfectly beautiful friends from perfectly functional families where they still believe that their job is to take care of, of the male folk of the family on a routine basis. So what do you do if you do find yourself part of that kind of community and you love the community, but your personal values are rebelling against the group values?
You've got to work with that. You've got to let the people around you understand that if they put that stop there and they won't be open to new ideas, that they're disincluding the truth of you. So they can't really be that close in the first place. I work with a lot of Indians for this very reason. but one thing I want to stop you on is you said they come from perfectly functional families. That's actually not possible today. And this is another thing that people love to resist that I teach about. Uh-huh. Dysfunctional family dynamics account for like 99.9% of human families today. So when a psychologist looks at somebody and calls it a dysfunctional family, it's really dysfunctional.
Oh,
it's really dysfunctional. But even the process of socialization in the healthiest of families is dysfunctional today. You can't raise a child in a dysfunctional society to cope in a dysfunctional society and call that functional. So I mean, with the human race, it's got to start to look at itself as if we actually, none of us are actually quite healthy.
Like you mean physically or psychologically?
I see them as all interlinked, psychologically, emotionally, and that becomes physically. If most humans knew what it actually felt like, even physically, to be perfectly in alignment, it would shock them. Human beings today are operating at about 20% of capacity. Mm-hmm. And we don't know it because we become acclimatized, you see. That's the problem with the average adult. Mm-hmm. They don't remember how painful the process of socialization was. They don't remember how much they were educated to go against the stream of their own consciousness, against their own desires, against the way they feel, against everything. And by the time we're adults, we are acclimatized to a level of resistance that is so unhealthy, I have no words, but we call it functional.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess part of the idea of functioning in the society is to actually compromise on certain things about yourself so that you are acceptable by the society. So I guess it's quite natural that we grow up in this way. I want to go back to one interesting thought that you shared, and I want to ask you what you feel about that. So you said that we are so craving independence, but actually it's autonomy. So I want you maybe to talk about that a little more, because I was talking a while back when coronavirus paralyzed the whole world, and I was talking to one futurologist from Russia, and he expressed an interesting idea: is that we as human species we don't even realize how dependent we are on this civilization that we have built for ourselves. Because, okay, the virus was the way it was, but imagine if we lose internet or electricity, and we don't even know how to feed ourselves. Like, I was trying to grow cucumbers on the balcony, which didn't work very well. So don't you think that independence in general for a contemporary human being is an illusion? And can you explain a little bit the difference between independence and autonomy? Because I think it's a very important point.
Independence is a myth, not just for the modern human, for a human full stop, regardless of what point in history we're looking at. Maybe even more so before. We are able to believe in the myth even more so because we've created a society where that dependence is more hidden. See, like if I go to the grocery store, for example, and I buy something, I can tell myself the story that I was independent in that moment, but actually I just depended on the truck driver who brought the food here, the farmer who grew that food, whoever produced the seeds that farmer used. It's just, I mean, if you really track the train of all the people who our lives depend on, it's quite terrifying. And I feel like most people love independence because they hate powerlessness. We hate powerlessness also because we have a lot of trauma around our interpersonal relationships. We've experienced being dependent on somebody making us powerless, and then the other person doesn't have our best interests in mind. And so the second we're dependent, we lose happiness because they're going to make a decision for me. They could make a change that ruins my life. So it's all about, you know, us taking our power back by getting into, I can do this for me and it's not dependent on you. It's a complete illusion. But autonomy is different than independence in that it's a sense of self. If you have a physical incarnation that you call by one name, then you have personal preferences, personal needs, personal purpose. You have all these elements of self, right? And it's very healthy to develop that, as healthy as it is to be able to let go of it.
Interesting.
Yeah. So autonomy, I define autonomy as a sense of separate self.
A sense of separate self.
Yes, and there's an upside and downside to that.
Because I have a feeling that you actually said something the opposite to separate self earlier. That, you know, your happiness cannot depend just on you. It's you're part of that wider. Like, if the person is lying on the ground and you're stepping over that person, it's still part of you, right?
Yes.
So how does autonomy marry with that?
When somebody gains enough awareness, their self grows. So your selfhood now contains others. Not contains them in a way where now I know the truth for you and you don't get to tell me anything because I did that for you. It's narcissistic, right? It's that when I expand wide enough to contain the world, now you're a part within me. So is your enemy. So is your sister. So is your mother. So is your it could be inanimate objects, even your couch, your table, everything, right? So your sense of self does this thing. And I don't know if it'd be funny because we're having this conversation. I did this video that was called Oneness is Not the Absolute Truth of the Universe, right?
Oh, no, I haven't seen that. That sounds fun.
You'll like it because what I'm essentially saying is that oneness is the ultimate ego.
Oh.
It's the biggest ego that exists. It is when all things within a unified field are one. Ego is self. Ego is one. So what we are calling, we can't even use a word for this though. See, I use a word and I make something a singularity. So the truth of this universe is beyond this. But one step in front of that is when all things in this unified field are treated as a single point with no other system to relate to. This is one, right? That's the ultimate ego.
It's fun, ironic maybe in some way. You know, I wanted to ask, because this is an interesting topic and I want to probe a little bit here and there. So one thing which I want to ask is, you know, for me, it's sometimes hard to to try to be conscious about oneness, because it's easy to do it to people that you love. Like, it's easy to imagine that, you know, your dear loved people, like your children or your parents or your spouse or your lover, whatever, that they're part of you, especially the people that you admire, let's say even celebrities. But we all have that those people somewhere out there that make us feel uncomfortable. For me, for example, I have to admit, I have hard times with homeless people. I've heard some people saying they have hard times with, I don't know, with people who are sick, who are dying, with people who are different political views, whatnot. So how do you actually, I don't know, try to realize that you're still one with those that are so disturbing to you that you have hard times even looking in their eyes?
You stop telling yourself that you have to feel good towards that. There's this idea that to include something as a part of you means you have to have a positive opinion towards that thing. That's not even how a person can feel about their own parts. But the way that you get there is through understanding. So the first thing that I have people do is to get rid of the idea of loving something, get rid of the idea of approving of something, and think about understanding something instead. If it's a part of me and that's a reality, I have to understand this part of myself. If all I'm doing is this, I'm not really understanding that part of myself.
I really love this idea, because a few months ago, maybe half a year ago, I suddenly realized that our fascination with love is a little bit of a dangerous path, because first of all, psychologically, it's a little bit hard. If you don't really truly love someone, to convince yourself that you love that person, it's actually a sure path probably to some psychological disorders and traumas. So I discovered for myself another virtue, which is kindness, because it's easy to be kind to something you don't like or even disagree. You can still be kind. You don't have to love that person. So I really love what you say, that you don't have to feel good about that otherness, you know, to actually experience oneness. So thank you for this one.
I'm going to tell you something ironic. I'm going to tell you something really ironic. The more you understand something, the more your positive emotions towards that thing tend to grow. So it's like a person who doesn't understand sharks. That there's a reason why oceanographers love sharks, because they have the most understanding, especially if they're shark experts, right? To understand something, the harder it is to have a resistant mentality towards that thing. So it's not, but I don't want people to lock into the idea that the goal of understanding something is to try to get to a space where you feel positive towards something. I'm just saying it's this interesting natural result of doing so.
How do you ever feel, do you feel feelings which in personal growth would be deemed inappropriate towards people, let's say, like, and do you allow yourself this?
Oh yeah. Yes.
Because I think we are sometimes very hard on ourselves, like we can't admit that someone might be rubbing us the wrong way or hurting us.
See, I'm a lover of reality. You can't do anything with reality. You can't improve reality. You can't create resolution without reality. And so this is part of what makes most people uncomfortable about me. Like if I have somebody who's got a murderous rage in them, I will have them come up and describe the type of thoughts they're having about killing someone, because that's what's real about them. Without this attitude of, you really shouldn't be thinking that way. No, the reality is they're thinking that way. It's all right. So where does this come from? Let's seek to understand it, because they don't like it. They don't want to stay there. So let's create resolution. But resolution cannot occur without reality. So if we're attached, that's the problem with humanity right now, one of them. If we're attached to this idea that you can't have those thoughts, then I'm going to deny that I have them, even though I have them. Yay! Now we're going to get somewhere.
So where does this come from? I think people generally don't know how to deal with their negative emotions, because we usually get punished for feeling anything less than positive. Like if you're in a bad mood, society punishes you essentially, not maybe directly, but indirectly they will shun you. So where does that? Yes,
I know, you can see my blood pressure rising. My personal pet peeve. This is my thing. Well, systemically, this starts in childhood. It's that there's no education for parenthood. I realize that we all have these differing ideas, but I mean, I need you to get the ridiculousness of this. I mean, imagine you're an extraterrestrial who steps down on the planet today. You find out that a little physical human, baby, child, becomes imprinted in the first 8 years of their life. and there's no one teaching how to do that correctly. You're just throwing this little being into somebody's hands and being like, well, I hope your parents did it right. Because they didn't, I can tell you that. And so it's like parents are entering into the parenting not knowing what the hell to do with this thing. Like they hand you this little infant at the hospital, they're like, have fun figuring this out, you know? So a parent is going to automatically default to dealing with their kid the same way that their parents did.
Yeah.
So it's like, if we want to deal with this systemically, it's about teaching parents how to manage their children's emotions. And that's what makes it so that a person learns how to manage their own emotions. Self-regulation of emotions is a skill. And this is part of the reason the justice system has to do away with the way that they're doing things, because they're approaching an adult as if all adults have somehow learned that. They haven't. It's a developmental issue.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, here's my blood pressure. So it's about teaching parents how to manage children's emotions. And the way that I have to do that now, working with adults, is to do what should have been done when they were 2 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Let's validate the emotion. Let's feel how that emotion feels. Let's feel what it's telling us about ourselves. How can we actually take proactive action so that that emotion feels a little better than it feels? I mean, it's a very easy process, which doesn't feel easy to start with because we're so trained to the opposite.
Mm-hmm. So we are trained to the opposite. Does that mean that we are afraid of being rejected if we do go that way? Or we are afraid in general of the emotion, thinking it can, I don't know, mess us up, screw us up, kill us?
It's both. So like, I'll take you through the process for a child. An emotion is an all-consuming experience for a child. Before a certain age, they don't actually have the capacity to regulate. They lack it. So if you're looking at a little kid who's throwing a fit, they actually can't learn how to regulate. They have to be regulated, right? So first they have that overwhelming emotion. And when a parent reacts to that emotion that the child is having as if it is a big problem, then the kid gets even more afraid of it in themselves, right? And then on top of it, when you add those layers of you shouldn't be feeling this way, now the kid's has a self-narrative of something's wrong with me. I'm feeling this way and I shouldn't be feeling this way. Something's seriously wrong with me. So this is the embedding of the shame as the core self-concept for a physical human begins. So yeah, we're afraid of the way that the emotion feels and afraid of the consequences of experiencing the emotion. And so we actually have created a society full of people who have triggers relative to their own emotions. You feel an emotional state and it triggers this cascade of, oh my God, it's no different than when you take someone with post-traumatic stress disorder who's been to the war, and what you do with this person is you put them near a grenade. They hear that sound, right? Even if it's a firework, and they're like, because of the association. So we've created a society full of people with a negative association to their own emotions. And it's not just negative ones, that's the most common one, but it can happen even with positive emotions. I mean, people who are part of in families with overworked parents, and I'm using that because it's like less dysfunctional. How many people are overworked in today's world where you've got mom and dad both who have to have a full-time job, and have fun with the kids after you get home and want to crash on the couch. So with an overworked parent, when a kid's jumping around and making a lot of noise and really excited, your first reaction is, oh my God, would you just shut up and go in your room? You've punished a positive emotion. So many of the people who come to me as adults are like having huge issues with happiness because they're programmed away from it. They actually have a negative trigger around those positive emotional states.
Well, when it comes to happiness, I think it's a very ironic emotion as well, because on one side, everybody says they want to be happy. I don't think many people would argue with that statement. Yet, if you suggest that they learn how to be happy, most people say, I don't have time for this. It's not serious enough. So I wonder what's up with this happiness. I asked you that earlier, and I know you said you're too smart to be happy, which was a cool answer. And it's actually, I think research proves that it's true. People with high IQ tends to be less happy. But what would you say, I do not know what's the situation right now in US. I know in Asia, where I came from 2 weeks ago, people were still pretty much self-isolating, and it was a long period of 3-4 months, facing their own emotions on a daily basis and not having a chance to escape into everyday life routines. Do you have any experience right now when the world has been already for a few months going through interesting times and dealing with those interesting times on their own. Do you notice how are people dealing with that? Are they doing okay, you know, managing their own emotions on them by themselves, or is there something brewing which will show up later?
We have a mental health crisis on our hands in the world right now, and nobody is talking about it.
Mm.
We're too busy writing articles about how many cases are popping up in what state. Right now, you've got people that are committing suicide at an insane rate. You've got people who are slipping into depression, back into addictions. This is like a pandemic.
Mm.
That's the real pandemic.
Mm. The emotional, the psychological reaction to what had happened.
Yeah, well, because humanity, I mean, I don't know, it depends what your slant is on what's going on, but let's make the most generous assumption for the fact that what we're dealing with is just a straightforward pandemic. The human race has been put in a lose-lose.
Mm-hmm.
Because the measures that we're taking are destroying human lives as well. Mm-hmm. So it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't type of scenario, you know?
Mm. So what can a person do in this situation where I guess there are a lot of emotions. For some people, it's uncertainty or fear, because I'm sure a lot of people have lost their livelihoods or jobs. So I know people have gone bankrupt, and fear for health for some people, because we hear quite a lot of information of how many people are dying. And now that Australia is back into quarantine, you're like, oh my God, is it even ending? Is there any suggestion you could give to people to actually deal with all of that onslaught of pain, which we are also apparently not learned how to deal with?
Yes. No matter what is happening in the world, you can always choose what you put your energy towards, what you commit your energy to. So what this whole situation or any negative situation should be showing you is what you're powerfully wanting.
Mm.
So this is like, what this is doing is like a pressure cooker that's making people have to become very aware of what they are and what they are wanting. That's like a self-defining process. And once you have figured that out, it's about figuring out how to put energy into that. And we got to stop as a species telling ourselves the story of, can't. Because right now in the world today, when we figure out what we powerfully want, we're like, well, here are all the ways it can't happen. That's not the way to create success. The way to create success is to think about, all right, I got these 15 doors closed. What's the one door that's open?
Mm.
And that, like, a lot of human innovation is going to come out of that based off of what we're experiencing right now. What are the ways to create safety? This will be, one person versus another person. For one person, their happiness or expansion during this time is to figure out what are new ways for humans to connect. For another person, it's a real exploration into just how much their own personal attachment is to safety, or should be. Right now it's like a lot of people I'm seeing getting pinched into this place where they're having to ask, what is our safety worth?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is it worth the loss of quality of life?
Mm-hmm.
So then you get into these types of philosophical questions with yourself, which are quite important for a person to ask, because that can change the whole entire course of their life.
Do you think people even will start talking about that? Because I think the whole discussion around the pandemic is a little constricted, because there is one politically correct narrative and everybody is expected to talk this way, but any questioning as to what is the alternative cost, or not alternative, but the cost that we don't see, like as I said, I spent most of it until now in Asia, where there are a lot of people who have had day jobs and they've lost their livelihood, and in Malaysia there are already segments of population which are starving right now, and I'm sure there will be a lot of human life costs in the countries, maybe poorer countries, and we won't even hear about that because they don't have the same voice. So how do you feel that the humanity is going to open up to other conversation around what happened with this pandemic, or are we going to still look at it like horses with those things, blinds on the sides?
It depends on how bad it gets, and it depends on the person.
Mm-hmm.
I have, a lot of people are embracing the traditional narratives that's going on here without realizing that media companies are a business. So somebody has to be benefiting from those stories being put out. But if you step back from this, I see more and more people questioning it every day because they understand that things aren't adding up. And because of, things like that, people are doing the math. nothing adds up because they're doing the math as to wait, how much money is being lost right now. And we may say money shouldn't matter compared to lives, but money is lives, actually, in a society that's dependent upon finance.
Mm-hmm.
So even though that narrative is pulsing, what's interesting about me interacting with a lot of people around the world, regardless of their slant or persuasion, is that I feel like a lot of people, they're like, it doesn't sit right with them.
Mm-hmm.
The story, I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Also, with so many mixed messages causes them to be like, what's really going on,
Mm-hmm. My conversations, this series of conversations is always a little more casual, and I can end up talking about another thing, but I want to go back to pain because I like this topic anyway. So what do we do with pain after all? I mean, it's obviously it's part of life now. There is even more pain around. What do we do with it?
We seek to create the improvement. You use it to create what the opposite is, right? What it's indicating your personal truth is. So let's say that my personal truth is that I'm in pain. When I look into that, the personal truth that's underneath it is I'm alone. Then my focus is about how to get from a space of aloneness into a space of connection with people. Mm-hmm. So the first place that I have people look isn't to just go create connection. It's what's in the way of my connection with people.
Mm-hmm.
Is it where I live? If so, that can be changed. Is it the way that I'm thinking? I mean, a lot of people who say I'm lonely have a lot of personality traits that keep them lonely, to be honest. So looking at the parts of yourself that feed into that pattern and changing your personal behavior there. Any of these steps you take brings you closer and closer to that state of connection and therefore the state of well-being. And so it's like the better it gets, the better it gets.
Mm-hmm. I know this question passed my mind when we were talking about oneness. And now that you've mentioned connection again, how do you feel contemporary humans are dealing with the connection? Because on one side, we obviously have a lot of attention to our lives, but
horribly.
And what's our biggest problem with that? What have we unlearned? What maybe can we fix to make it work better?
Our perception of separation,
mm-hmm.
shame, and fear.
These are interesting. Can we go deeper into that? Perception of separation, shame, and fear. Yeah.
Okay, so the perception of separation, this story starts way before physical life. This is the most esoteric of the answers I'm going to give you.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about the energy in the universe, right? If you take this concept that all is one, mm-hmm. the energy in this universe was a unified field until it thought the thought I. The second it thought that thought, there was nothing to be in relationship to, was there, because there's nothing but it. Mm-hmm. So that was the birth of loneliness within the consciousness of source. What's interesting about that separation is you can't control it. When you think I, all of a sudden the fracture happens. It's like a crack down the one. Mm-hmm. And this started the process of fragmentation. So you've got a crack and a crack and a crack and a crack. And down here, you've got different dimensions now. You've got in this physical dimension, you've got the table, you've got me in my own body. I've got this organ, that organ. So I want you to sort of picture having a pane of glass and shattering that glass. And now there are these pieces everywhere. Mm-hmm. But it's all source. So it's all one, right? Yet here's where it gets complicated, right? Free will is an element of that original pane of glass. That means if you crack the glass, all of those pieces have free will and the capacity to create and all of those original qualities. Oh no, now everybody has to be in alignment in order for there to be oneness again. Mm-hmm. So the perception of separation is the first element to loneliness, the lack of connection. Mm-hmm. It's the perception that I am separate from everything, every other person, the universe at large, and it's the fact that internally you are fragmented. I mean, we as a person, this is one of the most important things, if you want my honest truth, that a person can do, is to stop seeing themselves as a singularity and to start seeing themselves as an ecosystem. Mm. So you've got all of these different parts. We call them sides, right? Let's just talk on the psychological level, because that concept of the self as an organism extends to the fact that you have different organ systems. It extends to the fact that you are inhabited by all these bacteria upon which your life depends. On the psyche, the level of the psyche, right? You've got all of these different sides, which are like individual selves within you. Mm-hmm. And we just call it a side. So like when you go and exercise, I'm pretty sure you're in a different mood than when you're on a date with a guy, right? It's two distinct personality sets. And so if you start to think about yourself as an ecosystem, you start to see that your unhappiness is about the lack of connection of those parts inside you. You've got one part that shames you, one part that doesn't even, have a connection to the other part. You've got one part that wants relationships, one part that doesn't. And so loneliness and the lack of connection is primarily a byproduct of the space between the internal selves. Mm-hmm. We've got to go to a place where we recognize that state of separation, recognize it's actually, in fact, not the reality, recognize we can't live in that state of separation and be okay, and create integration within ourselves. That's the separation element of lack of connection with the physical human. The second element, which is shame. Shame is one of the most poorly understood dynamics on the planet, because we think that shame is an emotional reaction. Mm-hmm. It's actually a biological affective reaction, much like the fight or flight mode. Mm-hmm. So this is how it goes. Our entire existence depends upon other people. If I take an infant and I put it on the sidewalk, it is dead. Yeah. What that means is that your entire biological system is wired for connection to be the primary need for you as a human, more than food and water. That's why when you have a breakup, you're suddenly not hungry or thirsty anymore. Right? So our primary need being connection, that is like the whole nervous system is wired for that. And first and foremost, wired for a connection with the primary caregivers. So what happens here is when a primary caregiver, somebody upon whom your life depends, and that's why you need the connection, turns against you in some way. That's the perception. Mm-hmm. I don't like this about you. Why are you always so negative? Mm-hmm. We perceive that as a push away, and that threatens the entire system. And so the biological affective reaction is to create an internal triangulation whereby we turn against that part of ourselves to gain closeness with the person upon whom our life depends. Mm. So shame is a biological affective reaction, internal triangulation mechanism to establish closeness with somebody upon whom our survival depends. Wow. And so you can't get rid of shame.
So in a way, you're rejecting a part of yourself so that you will be accepted by someone important to you.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So we do not reverse this process by trying to stop feeling shame. We can't do that any more than we can get rid of our fight or flight mechanism. Mm-hmm. The way that we deal with shame is by recognizing when that has happened, and instead of pushing that away, that part of ourselves away, we bring it closer. Mm. And this is why I'm saying that the self-help industry feeds shame to such an extreme degree, because you walk in and you say, I've got angry thoughts. Oh my God, let's help you how to transcend your shame. Oh no, you've just fed it, my friend. Mm-hmm. If you have these angry thoughts, you have to powerfully pull them closer to you. And what's interesting is that by doing so, right, mm-hmm. by pulling the parts of you that you detest closer and including them as part of you so that you fully understand them, mm-hmm. they now perceive a connection with you. And so those parts of you can't hurt you anymore. Mm-hmm. And then that means the expression out into the world is one that's going to be beneficial to you instead of detrimental to you. Mm-hmm. So we tell ourselves as a species that if we accept the fact that we have murderous rage, or if we accept the fact that, we are pretty self-centered or really want fame or whatever it is, we tell ourselves we're going to become some corrupt, horrible person. The truth is the exact opposite. Mm. That trait transforms into its most high expression is what happens. So a person who integrates the fact that they want fame may become this wildly entertaining person. Mm. You can't say, oh my God, the expression of wild entertainment is like, oh my God, no, that's so shameful. Nobody's going to say that.
It's so interesting because we just had a discussion a few days ago with my friend, and I was talking about my values, and often when we have a value, we glorify it in a way. And I was saying that, a lot of the positive values, they have the extreme. I learned it from my own value because one of my values is justice, but I was also born in Soviet Union where justice was the basis of everything, but it also led to a lot of inhumane acts, because what's justice for someone may be very cruel for others. And then we were discussing my other values, and then he said, even kindness, which I talked about, it can be taken to the extreme and backfire. So what you just said is the other side of that coin, which is very fascinating, and I will have to think about that, about how your most shameful emotions or the darkest expressions can actually when they're elevated to their highest self, turn out to be positive. Well,
Yeah.
not, I mean, positive is of course a very, very funny word, but I mean, they may turn to be something of a power for you, or something, you know, something to cherish rather than to be ashamed of. So thanks for this interesting idea. I have to digest it still, though.
Okay, good. So the third element of the lack of connection is fear.
Mm-hmm.
To fear is, yet again, to create separation by pushing something away from yourself. When you're afraid of something, that's what you're doing. So I want you to imagine this circle. You're standing in a circle with a bunch of people. If you start to fear those people, you will choose one or two actions, one or the other action. Either you will push them out of the circle, therefore you're alone in the circle, or you will take yourself out of the circle, therefore you're alone outside the circle.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you push something away from yourself, you create that distance or that separation, and therefore lack of connection with that thing. But the antidote to fear is understanding, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is why, you know, fear is actually the opposite of frequency from love, because to love is to include as a part of oneself. It's that simple. To fear is to disinclude.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the three elements that create a lack of connection within the physical human.
It's been very interesting, and I wish I could go deeper into certain topics, but I'm also mindful that we were supposed to meet for just 1 hour, and there was a little bit of delay in the very beginning. But thank you so much for giving so many interesting twists and spins to the rather like maybe familiar things and topics. But thank you so much for that. You know, actually, as you were talking, I remembered one friend of mine actually shared a very interesting thing that NASA, on the website of NASA, they say that you know, there is this matter in the universe, and 5% of that matter we can explain, but the rest, 95% or even more of the matter, we don't know how to explain. So scientists just call it dark matter. So thank you for speaking up for the dark matter, because apparently it's 95% of the universe, yet we never shine the light on it, and we have no idea what it is. So yeah, as you were speaking, I suddenly remembered that interesting analogy, and I just wanted to share it with you. So thank you so much, because there are not many people who want to talk about that, and have the courage to talk about that, because that actually triggers so many things in people that make them feel shameful or want to hide, and it's not an easy topic to talk about. So thanks a lot for that. And thank you for finding time. And traditionally, although we don't have the live audience right now, but I know that when we publish it, there will be a lot of audience. I want to ask you guys to leave a heart for my guest today, for Teal, for her wisdom, for her generosity, and for your love for humankind. Thank you so much for that.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.